Have you ever pondered what transpired on the Titanic's final night? It's a question that has intrigued historians and enthusiasts alike for over a century. The Titanic, a beacon of human ambition, faced an unfortunate fate, leaving behind a sea of questions. What really occurred on that fateful night? What were the last moments like for those on board? These are mysteries that continue to captivate us, drawing us back to the early 20th century. Join us as we unravel the chronicles of Titanic's last hours. The RMS Titanic, the ship dubbed Unsinkable, embarked on its maiden voyage on April 10, 1912. A marvel of engineering, the Titanic was the largest moving object of its time, a symbol of human ambition and technological prowess. Its construction was an undertaking of epic proportions, taking 3 years and the toil of thousands of workers. The Titanic was not just a ship, it was a floating city. With its luxurious interiors, it promised a journey of comfort and grandeur, especially for the first-class passengers. There was a buzz of anticipation as the ship set sail from Southampton, England, heading towards New York. On board were some of the most influential figures of the era, including millionaire John Jacob Astor and the unsinkable Molly Brown. These individuals, along with over 2,000 others, were eager to be part of this historic voyage. Little did they know their journey would become one of history's most tragic maritime disasters. Just before midnight on April 14th, the Titanic's fate was sealed. The colossal ship, hailed as a marvel of engineering, was on a collision course with destiny. The night was calm, the sea like a sheet of glass, but lurking beneath the surface was a threat that would prove fatal: an iceberg. Despite the advanced technology of the day, the iceberg was spotted too late. The crew, realizing the imminent danger, made frantic attempts to steer clear of the iceberg. The ship's first officer, William Murdoch, ordered hard a starboard, a desperate bid to veer the ship to the left. The ship's massive engines were thrown into reverse, but time was not on their side. The Titanic, for all its grandeur and size, was not nimble. The iceberg, indifferent to the frantic activity aboard the ship, loomed ever closer. And then, with a chilling inevitability, came the collision. There was no dramatic crash, no shattering of ice. Instead, there was a grinding noise as the iceberg scraped along the ship's starboard side, opening up a gash in the hull. In the immediate aftermath of the collision, there was an eerie calm. The damage seemed minimal to the untrained eye, but the iceberg had struck a devastating blow. It had pierced 5 of the ship's 16 watertight compartments. This was beyond what the ship had been designed to withstand, yet, in these first moments, the severity of the situation was underestimated. The Titanic was thought to be unsinkable. Its passengers were reassured, their fears quelled. But below decks, water was pouring into the breached compartments at an alarming rate. The ship began to list, its fate sealed by a silent assassin cloaked in darkness. As realization dawned, the atmosphere shifted from complacency to panic. The iceberg, a seemingly innocuous chunk of frozen water, had dealt a blow that even the Titanic couldn't survive. The unsinkable ship had been fatally wounded. The countdown to one of the most tragic maritime disasters in history had begun. In the early hours of April 15th, desperation set in. Time was the enemy now, more so than the icy Atlantic waters. The unthinkable was happening. The unsinkable was sinking. The frantic rush to evacuate the Titanic was underway. The ship's officers and crew were consumed with a singular mission: to get as many people as possible into the lifeboats. The ship was equipped with only 20 lifeboats, nowhere near enough for the over 2,000 souls on board. The first lifeboat was launched at around 12:30, carrying a mere 28 passengers, despite its capacity to hold 65. The fear of the boats capsizing if filled to capacity clouded the judgment of the officers in charge. A tragic miscalculation that would cost many lives. Meanwhile, inside the Titanic, the corridors echoed with a growing sense of panic. The ship was noticeably tilting now, the once grand and luxurious halls now a disorienting maze of fear and confusion. The orchestra continued to play, a haunting melody in an attempt to maintain a semblance of calm amid the chaos. In the wireless room, operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride were sending out desperate SOS signals, hoping against hope for a response, for a lifeline. Their fingers flew over the keys, the rhythmic tapping of Morse code, their only voice in the darkness. As the minutes ticked by, lifeboat after lifeboat was launched. each one a beacon of hope against the black night. Women and children first, a rule strictly enforced, yet many lifeboats went out half-filled, the desperate pleas of those left behind echoing in the night. The final lifeboat was launched at 2:20 in the morning, carrying just 47 passengers. As it rowed away from the stricken Titanic, the enormity of what was happening became painfully clear. As the last lifeboat was launched, over 1,500 people remained on the sinking ship. The Titanic, once a symbol of human ambition and technological prowess, was now an epitaph to hubris and the mercilessness of nature. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic plunged into the icy depths. The once majestic ship, the epitome of human ingenuity and ambition, was now succumbing to the unforgiving force of nature. The Titanic, with its grandeur and magnificence, now found itself in the throes of an unimaginable catastrophe. In its final moments, the ship, seeming almost sentient, made a desperate struggle against its inevitable fate. The stern rose high into the air as the bow was swallowed by the frigid ocean. The ship then broke in two, a sight that would forever be etched in the memories of the survivors. It was a chilling testament to the fragility of human achievements in the face of nature's might. The stern briefly righted itself, floating like a cork on the surface of the water, but soon it too began to fill with water and sink. The once bright lights of the ship flickering and then extinguishing, plunging the scene into darkness. The silence of the night was broken only by the eerie sound of the ship's death cry as it disappeared into the abyss. And then, there was nothing. The unsinkable Titanic had been claimed by the ocean, leaving behind only a vast expanse of freezing water. The survivors clung to lifeboats and debris, their cries piercing the silence of the night. The freezing ocean was littered with the remnants of what was once the world's largest and most luxurious ship. The immediate aftermath was a scene of chaos and despair. Over 1,500 lives were lost to the icy depths that night, a tragic end to a voyage that had begun with such promise and optimism. It was a stark reminder of the power and unpredictability of the natural world and of the hubris of mankind. As dawn broke, the sea was eerily calm, belying the tragedy that had unfolded just hours before. The unsinkable Titanic had vanished beneath the waves, leaving a scene of unimaginable tragedy. When the sun rose on April 15th, the magnitude of the disaster became clear. The once unsinkable Titanic had vanished beneath the icy waves of the North Atlantic, leaving behind a chilling scene of desolation. As dawn broke, the Carpathia, a ship that had raced through the frigid night to the Titanic's distress signals, began pulling survivors from the lifeboats. The lucky ones, the few, the survivors had escaped the icy grasp of the sea, but their lives would forever be marked by the night of horror. The sinking of the Titanic sent shockwaves around the globe. News of the disaster was received with disbelief and grief. The world mourned the loss of more than 1,500 lives and the end of an era of unshakable faith in human progress. The unsinkable had sunk, and with it, the invincibility of human ingenuity was called into question. Investigations into the disaster followed swiftly. Both the American and British inquiries reached similar conclusions. The speed at which the Titanic had been sailing, the lack of sufficient lifeboats, and the failure of the nearby ship, Californian, to respond to the Titanic's distress signals were all identified as contributing factors to the tragedy. Yet, the underlying cause was unmistakably clear. An overbearing confidence in human achievement had met with the merciless laws of nature. Let's revisit the key points of the Titanic disaster. The Titanic set off on her maiden voyage, a symbol of human triumph over nature, a floating palace that was deemed unsinkable. Yet the collision with an iceberg on the night of April 14th sealed her fate. Despite the desperate attempts to save the ship and her passengers, the Titanic plunged into the icy depths in the early hours of April 15th. The aftermath revealed the grim reality, a catastrophic loss of life and a harsh lesson about the limits of human arrogance. The Titanic disaster is not merely a historical event. It's a story that continues to captivate. It's a tale of dreams shattered, of lives abruptly ended, and of the brave few who survived. It's a stark reminder of our vulnerability, the fragility of life, and the respect we must hold for the mighty forces of nature. The Titanic disaster remains a powerful testament to human hubris and the unforgiving power of nature. It stands as a solemn reminder that no matter how far we advance, how bold our ambitions, we are, at the end of the day, mere occupants in the vast theater of nature's grand design.